Welcome to the astrological weather report for the October lunar cycle. To everything there is a season. My name is Daniel Fiverson. This month, in the northern hemisphere, fields and gardens ripen and then wither. The planet's energies fall back into the earth. In the southern hemisphere, the natural world awakens. Gaia's energy springs forth from the ground again. The Libra new moon seeks to restore balance to the world. Profound forces permeate the vibrational field as Libra's ruler Venus progresses through the late degrees of Scorpio. Mars alchemizes the month as we continue to pass through the fires of collective Negrito. Pluto and Aries catalyze the Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Mars. Evolutionary pressures continue to unfold through world events and personal circumstances. Pluto and Saturn will station direct. Jupiter and Mercury, the current rulers of the lunar nodes, will station direct. Ceres will station retrograde. Mars will ingress Libra. Venus will ingress Sagittarius. And the Sun and Mars will ingress Scorpio. Pallas and Uranus hold deep conversation. The higher mind activates new mental pathways. Probable futures shimmer in the zeitgeist. Saturn gathers and restructures the influences of the lunar north node. Chiron and Ceres massage our recently embodied emotional wounds and yield new awareness. We revisit the wounds we are holding, even as they recede into the past. So the Libra new moon occurs on October 6th at 13 degrees of Libra. The Sun and Moon form a partile same degree conjunction to Mars. Issues and circumstances regarding choices, instinctive behavior, anger, and resentment populate the collective agenda. At the new moon, Pluto stations direct. Three planetary configurations format this lunar month. The current Pluto square becomes a T-square triggered by the Sun, Moon, Mercury, and then Mars. An air grand trine from the lunar north node to Saturn activates the moon in Hygeia. And three yods, or finger of God configurations, form, as the Sun, Moon, and Mars alternate as focal points in conjunct the sextile between Pallas Athena and Uranus, remaining in orb for the first half of the month. Venus inconjuncts the sextile from Chiron and Ceres, which is sacred commitment to personal well-being being exposed. And Uranus inconjuncts the sextile from Mercury to Venus. The mental downloads will stream erratically, and we can feel mentally out of balance. And I'm going to unpack each of these configurations separately as we go forward here. So let's look at the cardinal T-square. The last square from Pluto and Capricorn to Eris and Aries has not occurred in 2,700 years since the axial age. I know you've heard me speak to that many times before. It began in 2017, has perfected 4 times, and has one last perfection this month, as you see here on October 9th. It will remain in orb until 2024. These chaotic evolutionary pressures define our time. The Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Mars challenge Pluto and Eris, setting up a crisis-driven cardinal T-square. The Pluto-Eris square has delivered COVID, Donald Trump, loss of normalcy, intensified political polarity created by the current U.S.-Pluto return and U.S.-Neptune opposition, and weather calamities and crises. This powerful configuration, will underscore the entire lunar cycle, as the moon, the sun, Mercury, and Mars oppose Eris. So let's look at this. This is an animation. And you can see here, oops, animations are a little tricky, I apologize. You see here that on the 7th and the 8th, the moon is, it's actually, I don't have the opposition on here, but the moon squares Pluto and opposes Eris. Then on the 17th, we have the sun squaring Pluto and opposing Eris. And then on the 21st, Mars opposes Eris and squares Pluto. And as we continue to the end of the month, Mercury will join them, squaring Pluto on November 2nd. Go back to that T square. You can see that the moon sets up this grand cross on the 27th as it opposes Pluto and squares the inner planets and Eris. And as we move through to the end of the month, we have Mercury squaring Pluto on the 2nd, and then the moon opposing Eris one more time on the 3rd. An air grand trine anchored by the Saturn lunar north node trine activates through the cycle by moon and Hygeia. And what is implied here are direct emotional experiences that teach us how to better manage and support our personal health, and opportunities open to examine ways to restructure the public health system. And I'll run this animation for you, and hopefully it'll go a little smoother. You can see here are the dates with each of these perfections as the month unfolds. A yod or finger of God formation focuses planetary energies that are required to reorient and change direction, and driven by challenging circumstances and crises. An inconjunct is a crisis aspect which correlates either to a Scorpio or a Virgo dynamic. So 3 different yods will form over the course of the lunar month as the luminaries Sun and Moon and the inner planets Mercury, Mars, and Venus transit Libra and Scorpio. Each in turn is archetypically embedded with the planetary frequencies of Pallas Athena, Chiron, Uranus, and Ceres. And you can see here as the new moon occurs how these two of these yods are already in place. So the focal point for the yods are the Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Vesta, Uranus, and the Sun again. And these are the sextiles that are being inconjuncted, if that's the correct verb, and the dates that it happened. So the Sun will be an orb with a yod from the 6th to the 9th. The Moon will inconjunct Pallas and Uranus, then take over from the 6th to the 27th, and it'll perfect 3 times because it will complete a revolution around the zodiac. Mars will be an orb inconjuncting Pallas and Uranus, also from the 6th to the 9th. Mercury will inconjunct Pallas and Uranus from the 6th through the 27th. Will be an orb perfecting 3 times because it will go retrograde. It is retrograde, and then it will turn direct and come back again. And I'll show you that in the animation. And Vesta will be an orb to inconjunct Ceres and Chiron from October 15th, from October 6th to October 18th. Uranus will be the focal point of a yod with Pallas and Vesta from Venus and Pallas from October 15th to the 20th, and the Sun will in conjunct Ceres and Chiron at the end of the month, the end of the cycle, from the 29th through the 5th. And these are all the dates of the exact conjunctions. And I'm just going to run this for you. Just going to run this for you so you can see how this unfolds over the course of the month. You can see that the moon is also doing some of its own acrobatics. But this is just about the odds. They're very powerful configurations, which really necessitate something to happen. So Mercury continues his retrograde backward journey through the sky for the first 12 days of the cycle. Mercury retrograde will conjoin Mars in Libra on the 9th, and it will balance and temper our common dialogues. Mercury focuses the Pallas Uranus yacht for most of the month, enabling mental downloads that apply pressure to rationally understanding the past. Narratives continue to carry the weight of ongoing chaos from the Pluto era square, with additional pressures from Jupiter and Saturn. And there can be difficulty establishing boundaries with our words as Mercury inconjuncts Neptune. Tension from Chiron brings our attention to where we are feeling wounded, and mental self-nurturing is encouraged by the trine from Ceres. Mercury will station direct on October 18th and exit his shadow on November 3rd. And again, here's all the dates of those perfections of each of those aspects to Mercury. And this is also a animation that I can run for you so you can see how this unfolds. So you see Mercury still moving retrograde. And the 18th, he stations direct, starts to move forward again, triggers the grand trine, triggers the yod. Comes around, he opposes Aries, triggering the T-square by the end of the month. Venus in Scorpio is the underlying support for the Libra lunar cycle. It's the ruler of Libra. Venus applies to and then separates from the lunar north node in Sagittarius on the 9th. So questions investigate our personal motives, our values, and our priorities. And it anchors one leg of the of the Pallas Uranus yacht from the 15th of October through the 20th. Relationships are jostled, priorities are interrupted, and sexual energies and tensions get recharged. Chiron provides healing support for relationship wounds. Pallas Athena challenges stubborn values and priorities. Ceres reveals the source of self-wounding. Commitments and conditions placed on relationships come into focus as Venus squares Neptune and conjoins asteroid Jupiter in late October. We encounter the need for greater self-reliance, which can cause confusion as the known boundaries of what we essentially know are blurred. This is the animation, and you can track these perfections here. as the cycle unfolds. Notice that midway through the lunar node station direct. So if we look at Mars activity for the month, difficult choices emerge as Mars triggers the Pluto-Eris square for most of the month. Mars' immediacy to the Libra new moon that we saw in the first chart of the new moon moderates our instinctual nature. The whispers in our head grow louder and become disruptive as Mars navigates a difficult passage with Pallas Athena and Uranus. We are encouraged to find more solid footing for self-love from Saturn and Ceres. And wounding behavior is exposed as Mars opposes Chiron. Confusion about choices and directions to take occurs mid-month as Mars interacts with Neptune. Tricky. It's all tricky. So again, you can see how Mars is triggering the T-square. It's receiving expansive support from Jupiter and some confusion from Neptune. So Jupiter in Aquarius dislodges outmoded priorities. Personalities go out of balance. Egotism overshadows authenticity and honesty. Narratives are enriched and lengthened. Personal truths are expressed and defended. Jupiter stations direct on October 17th at 22 degrees of Aquarius, and Jupiter will exit his shadow on January 20th. You can see there's not a whole lot of activity. It's basically Jupiter trining the Sun, Mars, and Mercury, and with the square to Vesta. Jupiter doesn't necessarily make everything better, but it does make it bigger. So Saturn stations direct on October 10th at 7 degrees of Aquarius. Saturn picks up the pace of his structural renewal projects as he moves forward. The Sun will square Saturn on October 30th, forming a T-square with a Saturn-Uranus square. Tensions increase between individual and collective priorities. Saturn restructures health paradigms and generates healthier lifestyles with support from proactive health asteroid Hygeia. And Saturn will exit his shadow in early January. So let's run this animation to see how this unfolds. So here we have the inconjunct to Uranus with Hygeia trining Saturn. Saturn will square the Sun on the 30th, triggering the T-square. Now we also see here Hygeia in conjuncting Uranus, which is going to add a wild card to the whole unfolding. So Saturn turns direct at 70 degrees of Aquarius on the 10th of October. A fixed T-square, and I have only aspects here to Saturn, so you're not seeing the complete configuration. But a fixed T-square here occurs between Uranus, Vesta, and Saturn in Scorpio, and it necessitates the resolution of conflicts and crises created by the disparity between individual and collective priorities. Do I want to get vaccinated? Do I not want to get vaccinated? Is a perfect example. An air grand trine with the Sun, Mars, and Saturn, and we see here the grand trine, again, the third leg is not here because it's just Saturn's aspects, provides opportunities for foundational and instinctual support for personal growth. And Saturn will exit his shadow on December 28th. Pluto continues to command center stage this month as he tangles with chaotic and resentful Eris. The Pluto-Eris square is built on the cardinal T-square by the Sun, Mars, and Mercury. Excuse me, they're right. It's built out by Sun, Mars, and Mercury, creating a T-square from the square. These profound discordant energies permeate the lunar month and are deeply embedded in both lunations. They aggravate anger and resentment and generally disaffect human behavior. These chaotic frequencies generate global cataclysm and catastrophe. But the Pluto-Eris square holds homeopathic remedies for cultural diseases, which generate evolutionary pressures and opportunities. And I'll repeat this in case you haven't heard or listened to any of the previous talks. The last quarter square from Pluto and Capricorn to Eris and Aries has not occurred since Homer, Plato, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Pythagoras, and Isaiah were on the planet, planting the seeds of the great thought streams of Western civilization. You can watch this animation. You can see Sun, Mars, and Mercury, still retrograde here, moving past opposing Eris, squaring Pluto. And now here comes Mercury to join the party at the end of the lunar month on the 2nd of November. So Pluto stations direct on October 6th, and he ends his annual retrograde only 8 hours after the new moon, stationing direct at 24 degrees of Capricorn, which happens to be the U.S. sun for the chart that I use. It's an exact Pluto return. At this station direct, Pluto's only 2 minutes from perfection to the last quarter square to Eris. This is the last of the 5 Homeric squares between Pluto and Eris that have occurred since January of 2020. Events will be driven forward, and things that have been in the planning stage will be initiated. And an air grand trine is also activated at this station, as Pluto and Capricorn, the lunar north node, and Hygeia and Virgo all trine each other. Pluto supplies evolutionary pressure to our developing future via healthcare concerns. The COVID is making us understand what it is that we need to be responsible for our own self-care. The Sun, Mars, Mercury, and the Moon in succession trigger a cardinal T-square to Pluto and Eris, which you can see here again with the red aspect lines. On October 24th, support for self-nurturing emerges as Ceres in Gemini trines Pluto with a rational boost from the Moon in Gemini. Moon in Libra. On January 28th, 2022, Pluto will exit his shadow. Hygeia ingresses Libra on October 16th. An air grand trine with Saturn, Pluto, and the lunar north node restructure, empower, and provide a platform going forward for new approaches to proactive self-care. The disruptions to our normalcy and the crises created by the pandemic will continue through the end of the year. The worst will seem to be over by the summer of 2022. Can we expect a balance and equality of health care across divergent economic and geographic boundaries? And this is significant. This trine is significant because this occurs at the ingress and will embed the entire transit of Hygeia through the sign of Libra. Sirius stations retrograde at 12 degrees Gemini on October 8th. A mutable T-square, again, you can see it here in red, occurs with Neptune, Pallas Athena, and Juno, which pressures our commitment, Juno's commitment to what we know we should be doing in order to be responsible, Saturn, for our own well-being. Personal authenticity is tested. The lunar north node in Gemini exposes how we have taken care of ourselves in the past. We have experienced loss and suffering in order to sort out our priorities and refocus on what is essential. The Sun, Mars, and Saturn provide foundational instinctual support for our personal development as a result of what we have learned through circumstantial trauma and direct emotional experience. Excuse me. The Aries full moon occurs at 27 degrees of Aries on October 20th. And the month-long air grand trine, which I have delineated, is active and embedded in this lunation, as is the T-square. The moon conjoins Eris, triggering a Mars, Sun, Pluto, Eris cardinal T-square. An emotional tremor shakes things up. Relationships can get jumbled as partners experience restlessness and seek new experiences. And there is a need to balance self-will with the needs of others. Commitments are tested. These influences will be active until the next new moon on November 5th. So Mars ingresses Scorpio on the 30th. Mars is the traditional and co-ruler of Scorpio. At the ingress, Mars is balsamic, closing a conjunction, applying to a conjunction to the Scorpio Sun. Mars is an orb of an opposition to Pluto and Capricorn and square to Eris and Aries. This is a volatile combination of cardinal and fixed energies. This is like an immovable object meeting an irresistible force. Powerful forces are released. Expect fires, explosions, eruptions, and all kinds of incendiary situations. The trine to Jupiter fans the flames. And in conjunct to the lunar north node in Gemini generates evolutionary pressures and the need to find rational solutions to ongoing crises. As the Sun and inner planets move through the third quadrant of the natural zodiac, we experience what we share in common with our community and all of humanity. Recent history is showing us that if we're going to survive, we must recognize that what affects one of us affects all of us. Many of our shared resources, our water, our air, the quality of our food, the environment that supports all life on the planet, are endangered. Our polarized beliefs are generating cataclysmic divisions in our communities. Economic and social stratification is widening. Libra is about equality and balancing self-needs and desires with society's consensual requirements. Scorpio is about our sacred commitments to ourselves and others. We do not have to surrender our individuality to participate in the common good. We only need to find our place within it and how we can best serve that effort for ourselves and for everyone else. The rulers of the Gemini and Sagittarius lunar nodes stationing direct informs us that we must establish and seek new truths to live by. Sharing is a concept that predicates inclusivity. Exclusivity is a pathway to further discord and chaos. Unless we harness our rampant instinctual behavior, our lessons will get harder and our normalcy will become more challenging. We need to work on ourselves, but we cannot do it alone. And I want to close with what really inspired me for the title of the time that we're going through to write this forecast, the words of Pete Seeger, to turn, 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 that was recorded by the Birds. To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to reap, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to laugh and a time to weep, a time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together, a time of love and a time of hate, a time of war and a time of peace, a time you may embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time for love, a time for hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late. Namaste. Thank you for your attention. See you next month.